Good morning.
Good morning.
This is what we're going to talk about. Sorta. There's a blanks here. Any idea how to fill in the blanks? Remember, you recognize the book of the bee.
Yes.
You talked, yeah. Well, it's kind of like that because what's the book of the bee about? Sophie may not know what it is because she wasn't here last year. It's an ancient text. Isaac, do you know the book of the bee?
Not really. I think it's written in Syriac, though.
Yeah. Yeah, well, or yeah, I don't, maybe, yeah. Come from that region. I don't know if it was Syriac or Ethiopian or what. Probably Syriac. Yeah. It's about the history of the people about the children of Adam and the generations of Adam, going all the way to Christ. It's a very ancient text. So it's kind of like that, but what I want to talk about is more pressing to us. So we'll fill in the blanks. What if I put that? Do I need to put it in? Do I need to fill in the blanks? No takers? Okay, what if we put it here? And we did this. Birds and birds.
Oh boy, this is serious.
That's what we want to talk about.
Ding, ding, ding.
It's been my intention for a number of years, actually, to reflect with you on the biblical vision of sex, gender, man, and woman, for obvious reasons. Don't need to go into the reasons. Years and years ago, I published an article called Man and Woman in Orthodox Tradition, the Mystery of Gender. This was published way back in '93. My wife, it was sitting back here, along with Oscar's collections. And my wife picked it up and started reading it. And she liked it. So that encouraged me. Because this article was viciously attacked by some Orthodox feminist in France. She didn't like it at all. But my wife liked it. So it's been on my mind for a lot of years. I guess that's the point that I'm wanting to make with this. In my day, I start out with the modern feminism. Okay, modern feminism, that was back in the 90s, 80s and 90s. Has spawned an entrenched theological movement, as is evidenced by liturgical and ecclesiastical innovations in certain churches, and by the increasing number of publications that reinterpret the traditional sources of Christian dogma to fit a feminist perspective. Under the influence of feminism, questions concerning the dignity and moral worth of women find their theological focus in the controversy over women in the priesthood. I don't know that controversy was ever resolved. It's just kind of gone, we just don't deal with it anymore, at least not in the well, how would you say? It's been resolved in the non-Orthodox churches because they just went ahead and ordained women. Now, in my opinion, I think it was even before this article was published, there was a book, an anthology that was published. I think it was called Women in the Priesthood. It had such contributors as Kallistos Ware, Tom Hopko, Deborah Balanik, and several others. Do you remember that book, any of you? Well, of course, you younger ones might not remember it. I think I'm the oldest one here. I thought it was a darn good book, and I thought they answered the questions pretty decisively. But it was not well received, even so. So that might be why I said has spawned an entrenched theological movement. Entrenched. They're not budging. It's the ancient practice of ordaining only certain males to the liturgical priesthood is being vigorously challenged and made to appear as an arbitrary practice implicitly demeaning to women, shaped by a patriarchal culture and conditioned solely by sociological factors. In other words, that's the contention about ordaining, not ordaining women to the priesthood. But women in the priesthood is not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the birds and the bees. But I bring this out just to show, number one, that's been on my mind for many years, but also to show that it's a very, how would you say it? It's a controversial topic, and becoming even more so today. It was actually recommended by one of the professors at St. Vladimir Seminary in the early 2000s. He was recommending a book called the New Drug of the 20th Century, the 21st century. The New Drug of the 21st Century. It was on pornography. It was published like 2004, 2005 or so. And already in that, at that time, the author is describing how pornography and addiction to pornography was already exploding in the early 2000s, exponentially. This is 2024. It's not gotten any better. And as I began to say back just a few moments ago, the quote-unquote controversy over women in the priesthood has never really been, how would you say, explained. You know, it's never been explained, really, to the satisfaction of everyone. Although I don't know that it needs to be explained to the satisfaction of everyone. As I said, that one book that I referred to I thought was darn good, and I thought it explained it. But I think it's been put to rest, thankfully, by the bishops, by the synod. You know, they came out with several encyclicals that I intend to show you at some point on marriage and on on sexuality. But the thing is that even Orthodox theologians in our day are, how would you say, they're closer to the woke than they are to the awakened. they're mostly in the academic world. Not surprising. But, they have a following. Not in the OCA, but outside the OCA, in the Greek Archdiocese, for example, we have metropolitans and bishops who are closer to the woke than they are to the awakened. So, I don't know that I need to defend or to explain why this is an important topic. But when you have this environment that we are in, where it's even seeped into the church, it would seem self-evident, wouldn't it, that we need to talk about this. That the faithful need to understand the teaching of the church on this topic. And in fact, in the encyclical on marriage by the Holy Synod of Bishops of the OCA, the first paragraph enjoins the priests to illumine the people on this topic through preaching and teaching. But to do that, obviously, presupposes that the preacher or the teacher knows what he's talking about. I don't pretend to know what I'm talking about, but I feel that if we are Orthodox faithful, that we will be grounding ourselves in the Bible. And it will be the Bible that teaches us. So my intention is to share with you, to talk with you about this topic, but within very strict parameters. I'm very comfortable talking about this with those who have the mind of the church. I am not comfortable with those who do not have the mind of the church, and I won't talk with them actually. I do not, just to set it out there, I do not accommodate avant-garde views. I welcome you sharing your insights with me as we proceed. But as I say, we will stay within very strict parameters. Those parameters are laid down in Holy Scripture. Because we do believe that Holy Scripture is of the Holy Spirit. That it bears witness to the truth and to the wisdom of God that is not of men. I think that this is I don't know that you can get much deeper than this particular subject. Sexuality, gender, man, woman. I have my own ideas. Do you have ideas as to why it's so deep? So, how would you say, contentious even, maybe? Delicate? Any ideas? You kind of have to think about this, because it's very deep. You have to get down there. Let me share with you what I see, and then maybe that will, if it spawns anything from you, please feel free to share. I'm thinking that it's so dicey, for lack of a better word, because really, sexuality isn't something you think about. It's what you are. You're a sex. You're a gender. You're male, you're female. And that urge to create life, to find another person with whom one can create a family, is about as deep in our not just our psyche, but in our body as you can get. sexuality and gender, they touch the heart of our worldview. Would you say? Think about it. They touch the heart of our self-perception, how we think about ourselves, what we think about ourselves. It's entwined with, if it is not the very substance of our deepest longings and even our deepest self-doubts. What do you think of that? Yes, Dan?
I think that at the time of the devil's corruption of Adam and Eve, that the things in play were so basic and so simple that it's one of the, it's just one of the most basic and crucial things that you can attack. And that in the circles of the occult, the devil is often portrayed as like a hermaphroditic figure, and from kind of like a Gnostic worldview, one of the views is that the world comes from undifferentiatedness as opposed to concreteness that the Bible shows us.
Okay. Okay.
But just simple.
What's that?
Follow the world, there's death, suffering, and God made it so you had to procreate, so something's coming out of that.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to fall out. I'm probably going to be out there.
But now, I'm curious to know how you feel, how this resonated with you, how it hit you when I say that, what you and what the two Dans here are saying is that this goes to the root of everything, and that it's at the root that it's been corrupted, which makes sense. If the evil one is going to corrupt God's creation, he's going to go to the root, which is our sexuality and gender. But as I look at myself, try to understand why sexuality is so, can you even describe its force on you, its power on us? What I come up with is, that it's like the hearth where that holds our deepest longings, and along with that, our most severe self-doubts. It's what holds our self-perception, especially as the hormones start to kick in, right? We start to develop into young men and young women. Can you think of any other, deep, whatever that the issue of sexuality and your experience of sexuality and your own gender, how it plays in your soul? I've given my ideas. Garrett?
One thing that stands out to me is thinking about it in terms of like the whole reason for procreation is so that we can understand God. Like by begetting children, right? In the same way that out of the outflow of the love of God, we are created, or the outflow of the love of other ways we create children. And we learn, like that whole process helps us to understand. So without that,
All right.
it would be much harder for us to be able to, or God gave us those things for a reason.
All right. You understand what he's saying? I think I understand what you're saying. That through sexuality, it's easier we're able to understand God.
Also, too, like the way we're created, also like the purpose, right? I think going back to
All right, we're created that way for a purpose. You say, yes. And from what you're saying, it sounds like the purpose would be to the reason we're created like that is to become one with God. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. All right. So we'll need to unpack that. Yes, Rob.
I feel like the whole sexuality thing is an attempt by some people to be able to live in a way where they're satisfying their natural urges and at the same time justifying themselves as being right with God. They
Okay. They don't want to change, is what you're saying.
Exactly, and when you talk to people, they may argue that, what the Bible says about, say, homosexuality or adultery, it's not relevant because God is a God of love.
Oh,
And it's just rooted in the culture that it was written in and is no longer appropriate.
okay.
Yet I bet there would be none of those people who would tell you that if you could show that this actually is God's will for you, that they would submit to it.
I think you're right.
They want to be God. They want to determine what's right and wrong. And by just saying, God agrees with me, there's no conflict.
Yeah. God agrees with me. That's the whole thrust of their argument, to show that God agrees with me. Does it even occur to that argument to reverse it and ask, do I agree with God?
Or if there was a disagreement, would I change?
Well, I think that goes unstated because they know they wouldn't. So they got to stick with the other. I think I think you're right. But now let me, see, we only have like 5-10 minutes left. So this is going to be one of the challenges of tackling this topic in this setting. We have a very short time. So we're going to have to go very slowly, step by step. And I will have time only to put out one point at the most, perhaps, maybe 2 points each time. But so this morning we're just setting out the topic so that you can decide if you want to come back. Because and I don't expect it to be uncomfortable. I don't think it'll be uncomfortable. But so this morning, what I want to do is I want to set out the setting in which this topic is addressed. It is a very deep topic, and it occurs to me as I'm thinking how we're going to present this. It occurs to me that there's different ways in which you can approach the issue of sexuality, and I'll just put them down of what comes to mind. There's the physiological aspect, physiological and medical, or clinical, I suppose would be the better word. There's the psychological. This would be a la Freud and Jung in particular. There would be, I suppose you could say, the sociological, but I don't know how the sociological would be separated from the psychological. But then guess what? There's another approach. It would be the theological. And for us, that would mean the ecclesial, the church, or the Bible, the biblical. Now, looking at these four approaches, how would you say that our society? I'll simplify the question. In our society, do you see any quarters of the society going beyond any of these? Do you see any of them going beyond this?
Doesn't seem like they even acknowledge the clinical.
You say it doesn't seem,
The
I have a
basic
hard time
biology? Is that what you mean, like
Yeah.
basic biology?
there you go, yeah, biology.
DNA.
Well, they do, they've just separated now, right, there's gender and sex, so they found a way to make it fit, right? Because that's, when I've had conversations, and I state the biological obviousness, they're like, well, no, that's a social construct, and this is.
Yeah.
really separate.
Well, getting to the root of just all this confusion,
Yeah.
so that even though they're saying it's not confusion, but
Yeah.
just to really muddy the waters.
Yeah. I can't understand myself how anyone who grew up on a farm would hold to that view. If their parents had held to that view, they'd gone out of business. So anyway, so can you guess what approach we're taking this morning, over the next few weeks? Don, which would you guess? The theological. Yeah, duh. So what, why have I not done this before? As I said, as indicated, I honestly, I just don't feel that competent in it. Because it's, this is a huge topic, and one needs to have not only certain intellectual abilities, but also one has to have certain, interactive skills. And I feel that I lack all of them. But I'll tell you what triggered me to get off the fence and decide, there's two things, and to decide that maybe it's time for me to share with you what I've been mulling over the last several decades. Number one, I'm getting old. I don't know how much longer I have. I feel really good. I think the way I feel, I could go another 10, 20 years, but I could be gone tomorrow, get to be that age. And I feel that this is very important. I think there are very few who are addressing this topic theologically as it should be addressed, biblically as it should be addressed, if they're addressing it at all. And if they are addressing it theologically, biblically, they're doing it like Sophie is describing. They're distorting the theology, the Bible, to make it twist what Rob is, to the direction that Rob is describing, to show that God agrees with them. And they agree with society. They're trying to accommodate society. They have no interest in accommodating God. Which reminds me of Mother Macrina, when she was, this was years ago, we were talking about all these homosexual contracts drawn, described as marriage. It's not marriage, it's legalized sodomy is what it is. It's not marriage. And the argument given for attending the weddings, quote unquote, of a homosexual couple, that you want to show love. God is love. So you got to show love. You got to be nice. You don't want to offend them. And Mother Macrina quips right back. You don't want to offend them. What about offending God? Isn't that interesting? Our whole mindset is, God agrees with me. I need to be nice. I can't offend. We never think about me agreeing with God, me not offending God. God is not. And I think you're right on the money, Rob. That shows that my God is not God. I'm my God. But the second reason that I'm coming off the fence is because I heard of how one of my children thought it was time to talk about the book of the bee with one of my grandchildren. Two of them, actually. And they approached it from a physiological point of view, a physiological approach. And needless to say, both of my grandkids were traumatized. Actually reminds me of when my folks told me. They approached it from a physiological, and it traumatized me. For a long time, it traumatized me. But you know, it's like parents have little choice, because if you're not going to tell them, the kids on the bus will tell them. So we got to do something. I remember though that when I shared it, I actually don't remember telling it, talking about it to my kids. I think that I did, but I vaguely remember. But what I think I tried to do back then was I did not approach it from the physiological. I did not approach it from even the psychological. Or maybe I did approach it from the psychological, but it was from a combination of psychological and theological. And I'm going to conclude this morning's initial launch into this topic by suggesting to you that let me back up a bit. I'm thinking that the reason it's traumatic to our young pubescent children, when we describe this book of the bee in physiological terms, biological terms, is because sexuality between a man and a woman was not created by God to be outside the context of the family. It was never a purely physiological thing. It was in the context of God creating man as male and female with the capacity to procreate, to create children, and to take dominion of the world in a godlike way, which means the way of love, gentleness, goodness, not in the way of tyranny. And I think when we approach it from a purely physiological point of view, we fall quickly, almost right away, into the trap of the world that lives according to power. And it's too easy for sexuality to become for us an instrument, a weapon of power. Even the woman, who is weaker than the man, uses her charms as an instrument of power. You know, she has power over the male, and maybe it's a heady thing for the woman. This weak, diminutive, beautiful creature, able to bring a man to his knees just by her beauty, her charms. You know, it can be an exercise in power. But when you're a young kid, you're not quite there yet. You're still in the family. Your experience with the family, and to be given the raw details of the biology of sex is it's traumatic. So I think that I'm thinking that there is a way to teach our children the beauty of man as male and female that is not traumatic. What is that way? It's the way of the family. And I think that you already can be doing that. I think that we can be starting to teach our kids the beauty of sexuality from the beginning. And I've run out of time. But that is, to raise your children in a loving relationship. That means that mom and dad need to love one another. They need to be faithful to one another. And they need to, and so that the children grow up in this environment where mom and dad clearly love each other or are faithful to each other. And that's the environment I grew up in. And as a result, I was able to come out of the trauma and recover myself because of the influence of my family, not just my own parents, but my grandparents on both sides, and even my uncles and aunts. They all had wonderful marriages. So that was the environment that I grew up in. So then, what if in that environment, the first place, in that environment, I think you're already teaching your children, you're getting them ready for the next level of education about the birds and the bees. Because you're preparing them in the context that human sexuality was meant to be in. next Sunday, then, what we'll talk about is once in that setting, so that's the first step. The next thing we'll talk about is what's the next step, which I think we can start talking to our kids about 5, 6, or 7, age 5, 6, or 7, let's say, just roughly, in order to get them ready for the mystery of where babies come from. So then they hear that they learn that already from within this setting of of mom and dad loving one another, and they begin to see that it's not, that they begin to see how tender it is, well, we'll explain, but that's where we'll be going next Sunday. So maybe I'll see you next week, maybe I won't, but have a good week.